First of all, thank you so much for being here. I think I can say for all of us that we didn't expect to be here right now doing this, celebrating and remembering Pete's life, and that, he left us far too soon. But looking out at all of you, I am overwhelmed, as I know he would be as well, at how many people are here, how many lives Pete has affected and touched over 56 years. And you are all a part of Pete's life and a testament to what a wonderful man he was. We're here because we love Pete. Our Pete, just Pete. Pete with no pretense, no facade, no fake, no airs, no fancy, just Pete. Larger than life Pete, a life force invincible. Pete, the husband, the father, the son, the brother-in-law, the uncle, the cousin, the son-in-law, the colleague. Pete, the barbecue master, the gardener, the climber, the problem solver, the storyteller, the entertainer, the sausage maker, the mentor, and the friend. Pete loved life. He loved his job. He loved working hard. And it's said that no one wishes that they had spent more time at the office when they're on their deathbed. But I truly believe that Pete never regretted the hours he spent working. He loved making a difference. He loved his guys, his teams. I think it was clear that Pete had very high standards, but they were never higher than the ones that he had for himself. And I think that his teams and his colleagues liked him back most of the time. Quoting from Bill Dorey, along with Pete's complete knowledge of our business, Pete had a twinkle in his eye and an authentic style that endeared him to all he worked with. As Pete continued to move up the ranks at Granite, I would ask, well, do we need to buy you new clothes? Should you be wearing khakis every day? And he'd say, no, what I have is just fine. And you know it was. He managed to wear his jeans and work boots most days. As he liked to remind me, Donna, it's the construction business. Pete was a problem solver, and he was thinking out of the box long before it was a thing. He called it thinking. And the thing about Pete and problem solving was that he got it right most of the time. In fact, the kids would say, begrudgingly, well, Dad was right again, referring to some advice he'd given that they most likely hadn't followed, in which I would reply, yes, I know, it's very annoying. Moving along with Granite never changed Pete's humility. I remember one meeting he went to for either John or Jim, and he was meeting with Wall Street attorneys. It was kind of an important meeting, so I hope he was wearing his khakis and a jacket. But it was the kind of meeting where one false step could affect the stock price. I think he did okay, but anyway, after the meeting, he called me, and he said, so Donna, I'm sitting in this room with all these Wall Street attorneys and thinking, how did a farm boy from Harvard, Illinois end up in a place like this? That was Pete. Pete also loved food. He loved growing it, harvesting it, sharing it, eating it, barbecuing it, serving it to large groups, He would say that the customer appreciation parties that he had during the holidays were like Christmas Day for him. True success was to feed everybody and then send people home with bags of tri-tip chicken, sausage, and whatever else he was cooking. Pete also enjoyed a good drink. If you notice tonight, we only served gin and tonics other than the wine and beer because that was his drink of choice. Beefeaters if it was available. And he and we were becoming real wine snobs after moving to the Northwest. At one point, we thought we probably should put a breathalyzer on our iPad. We had joined, I don't know how many wine clubs while we were enjoying a bottle of wine. And the shipments would arrive and the bills would arrive, and we think, oh my gosh, we got to keep the iPad away when we're drinking. We shared many bottles with friends as well, at which at the end of the evening, Pete would be known to say, just another splash, Dan, and then we'll head home. Pete loved to tell a story, and he was really good at it. He would include people's names, first and last. He would set the scene, and even if you'd heard it before, which you probably had, it was fun to hear it again because it would be slightly new or slightly exaggerated or really exaggerated. And he loved nothing more than joining his boys and their friends around the fire pit in our backyard, telling his stories and giving out plenty of advice. He loved his sisters. It seemed never a day went by without a text or a call to one of them or a story about one or all of them. He loved his dogs, Gus and Tuff. They were his hiking buddies and went with him on most of his hikes and climbs until recently when they started to tire out. But Pete kept going. Climbing was Pete's latest passion, and he was drawn to it immediately. He loved the challenge, he loved the views, he loved the hard work, and he loved the guys that he hiked with. He would tell me that these guys let him climb with them, and he was honored. And I always knew what great guys these were, but after watching them 4 weeks ago, after one desperate phone call, they all showed up with night gear, with their backpacks, with the wind and the rain and the darkness, and they went searching for their friend, determined to find him. They returned home around 2 a.m. and went back at 5 a.m. And these men just kept going. They were phenomenal, and I will forever be grateful, as well as to the search and rescue, and as well as to Roy, who was the first one to go looking. But there was nothing Pete loved more than his boys. Joe and Will, or JoJo and Willie, they are his pride and joy. And with them, all his humility went out the window. I'm sure many of you thought that Joe was on his way to the Olympics and William to the NHL. Pete would have been so proud of Joe's triathlon 2 weeks ago that Joe so bravely did. And I'm just hoping that Pete had a really good view. And then not too long ago, William was playing in a hockey tournament in Spokane. And Pete was so excited to go and watch. He's back on the ice, Donna. And he was texting and calling William prior to the tournament. I'm guessing with advice like drink lots of water and your pee should be clear and all that stuff. And eventually William called me and said, Mom, does Dad know this is a beer league? Pete has left such a legacy in his 56 years. And he was the love of my life and my best friend. His philosophy about death was, when your number's up, your number's up. So you have to live a little each day, which is what he did. So I would ask that we remember Pete by living well, working hard, climbing on, enjoying good food and drink, keeping loved ones close, and remembering to live a little each day. Thank you.
Okay, obviously a lot of wonderful memories, and thanks, Donna. It really encapsulated so many things, and I know, speaking on behalf of a lot of you, to get up here and say those things and say it with such determination, and really to explain everything so eloquently, considering the circumstances, is pretty phenomenal. And so, what we're going to do now is we'll have the boys speak, and so it obviously makes sense to start from the oldest to the youngest. So we're going to have Joe say a couple words here, and so Joe, come on up.
All right. So, yeah, give it up to my mom. It was a fantastic speech. Really encapsulated my father's life, and I'll do my best to see what I can come up with as an encore. But for those who don't know me, I'm Joe. I'm Pete's oldest. I'm not the hockey player. But first, I want to say thank you for everyone being here today and to remember and celebrate Pete. My family is incredibly thankful for all of you, all of your support over the last few weeks. And it really has been a blessing to me and my family. Really helped us get through all this, as you can imagine, this really difficult time. So we couldn't have done any of this without you guys. And special thanks to those from out of town. I know how hard it is to get to Yakima. When we moved to Yakima, or when we announced that we were going to move to Yakima, I was like, Yakima? Where's that? You know, I was a city boy at the time, living in Reno and Salt Lake. I didn't understand the concept of a town that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. You know, as you might imagine, we're not really near anything. Our airport has one small gate and no international flights. You know, but despite all that, you somehow made it here, and we really appreciate it. Really, it really means a lot. So, for those who don't know, the Pacific Northwest was ravaged with fire and smoke cover all this week. Obviously, you know, it was Pete throwing this massive barbecue up there. You know, thankfully for the rest of us, he was able to pull some strings for today, got the smoke out of the way, clear the air, and it's turned out to be a beautiful day, and one that Pete helped make happen. And I'm sure he is great friends with the weatherman by now. I know the wind's picked up a little bit here, and thanks, Dad. The whole WSU tent coming down, I really appreciate that. Go Huskies. So, I was able to see my dad's life as from a unique perspective of being his son. You know, a bunch of you saw it from the sidelines, but there's really no comparison kind of see it from the field, or at least experience it from the field. And he was the ultimate family man, and he would do anything for his sons. So, I think I was 4 or so, and we were up at Lake Tahoe. We always went up there every summer when we lived in Reno. And one of my favorite activities as a kid was catching crawdads. And when I say fishing for crawdads, I really mean my dad was diving down to the bottom of the lake, picking up the crawdads, putting them in the buckets with me on the dock. And it was always like, "Oh, it's cold, Joe." I always had the same response: "He'll get used to it." I was kind of a jerk at 4. But my dad will, to me, he'll always be the championship crawdad hunter. But for Pete's sake, we later learned how to fish for crawdads ourselves, and promptly retired from crawdad fishing. And I don't think he was too sad about that. But speaking of fishing, it was kind of the first activity I remember doing with my dad. We'd go up to Hat Creek, California, and fishing for rainbow trout. And I had the little $10 fishing rod from Walmart, the one with the little lever that you put down and you flick it and it casts, because 3-year-old me didn't know what hold it, let it go meant. But I remember catching a lot of trout. My dad caught all the trout, but he credited me for some, and that was the type of dad he was. My life with him, it was never without embarrassment to me. So I went camping for this next story. And we'd always go hog hunting in Central California, Hollister, California, which is not by the beach, by the way. It's like kind of like Yakima, but smaller. One thing that camping lacks is a lot of things, like a bathtub. And but my dad, he improvised. He was good at that. You look around, and they're like, "Hey, get that bucket, or fill it with water, and give Joe a bath." Here I am in the middle of camp, in this 20-gallon bucket, taking a bath. And if we were inside, I would show a picture, but it's in the slideshow. So. But it was never without humility either. And the next year we went to the same camp, and it was a really rainy trip. We just got back from fishing. And anyone who has been in my dad's office knows the picture of Will and I with our fish. It's kind of posted everywhere. He's really proud of that picture. But what he doesn't tell you is about what happened afterwards. So my dad wanted, dry off all of our clothes, and we had in one of the tents we had this really intense space heater. We called the volcano, and so my dad was like, "Okay, heat. I'll dry off the raincoat." So he puts it in front of the volcano, and not too long later realized that there was no raincoat left. Vaporized. But he meant well. He was, he was always there for his kids. But one thing I can't thank my father enough, and I can't repay at all is, in his life he wanted nothing more than to teach his kids about the wonderful benefits of hard labor. This takes us back, 12 years ago or so. We were living in Utah at the time, and my dad had this brilliant idea of, our driveway sucks, let's replace it. I will get a jackhammer and tear up the driveway. And his coworkers were like, "Okay, so you need some equipment to help move the rocks and all that stuff out of the driveway." I was like, "No, my kids will help me." I was 12, I had noodle arms, you think I could pick up a number of boulders, throw it in the back of the truck? You really expect me to do the work of a backhoe? Well, I mean, he did, and as you can see, it did nothing to fix my noodle arms. But it did something more. The experience really helped us develop a work ethic and drive similar to my father's, and it taught us responsibility and not to complain. Complaining would result in a stern but fair talk, one of those father-son talks you dread when you disobey them. I think we all can relate to that. It taught us to break out of our comfort zone, which at the time was sitting in front of the TV watching Nickelodeon. But on top of that, we got a new driveway too, and it was under budget. My dad had all these crazy ideas to up our work ethic. He was a farm boy, and we didn't live on a farm, so he came up with all these crazy ways like, okay, how can I instill this work ethic into my children? There was the paper route. There was raising rabbits in the backyard. Not just doing our yard work, but doing other people's yard work as well. He's part of this strange religion that didn't believe in riding lawnmowers and snowblowers. And part of that's been instilled in me. I don't really have much of an interest in getting a riding lawnmower, but the snowblower is fair game. Sorry, Dad. Idaho gets a lot of snow. But these values and these intangibles that my dad instilled in me, it shaped my life in more ways than one, in more ways I could have even imagined. Running was originally an objective way to measure how hard I could work and push my body, and it's the most important thing in my life. It eventually turned into, hey, why work hard at one sport when you can work hard in 3? But it wasn't just sports. I got top grades in high school, which I thought was the ultimate sign of work ethic and drive, which got me to and through college with an engineering degree and a job right out of school. And that job's located somewhere where I knew nobody. Talk about breaking out of your comfort zone. But I like to measure the success of a life, not based on what they did, but what they're leaving behind. And not to toot my own horn, but I think he did pretty well with Will and I. And as you can see, everyone agrees with that. But when people I know pass away, I think of many ways that I can honor them in my everyday life. And my dad passed away 2 weeks before I was scheduled to race at the ITU Long Distance Triathlon World Championships. And this race was unique in that everyone who competed raced in a uniform with their country and their last name printed on the front of their kit. And to me, this provided a perfect opportunity to honor my dad and to show the world what the name Matheson meant. It represented a work ethic and level of vigor that no one has ever seen before. That no matter the challenge, we take it one step at a time and make it mean something. And at the end of the day, that ended up being the best race of my life. And I think I honored my dad pretty well that day. And I look out at everyone here. And you are all here because Pete touched your life somehow, in some way. For some, it was a major effort to get here, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm sure there are many, many people who wanted to be here today but could not. But he touched a lot of people's lives, and definitely in a way that was in a different light than he touched mine. Different than the person next to you. And with that in mind, I challenge each and every one of you. Every day for the rest of your life, when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, what can you do to honor Pete today? It may be something as simple as putting a ton of effort into work that you need to get done that day. Pick up after yourself. shut the light off in the back room. Or it can go and love your family and spend time with your kids. Take them on experiences they'll never forget. It could be something simple as fishing. You know, develop relationships with your coworkers and their families. Live a little more each day. But whatever you do, please, please, please don't honor him by reading and answering emails and flossing while driving. But they say you die twice. When the soul leaves the body, and again when the soul is forgotten. And I promise you, honor Pete every day. Pass it on to future generations. And when all is said and done, the legend that is Martin Peter Matheson will live on for all eternity, and therefore will never die. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Joe. Obviously, great memories, and coming from a perspective obviously a little different than Donna, but being Pete's children, you can imagine, was a unique and wonderful experience. And kind of finishing out is Pete's next son. If you ever have met Will and Joe together, obviously Will and Joe are their own unique selves, and so that's why I want to have Will come up and give his perspective on things as well. So, Willie.
Well, that was one hell of a speech by Joe there, huh? Let's give him another round of applause. So, I'm I guess I could say the youngest kid, more the crazier kid. And so I'm winging it right now. And I'd first of all like to thank everybody like they did before, and thank everybody who came out from everywhere. It's unbelievable to see how many hearts he touched, and I had no doubt in my mind that there would be this many people here. So thank you guys so much. The past few weeks have been tough, but we're going to get through it, and we wouldn't be able to do it without you guys, and it's unbelievable. So my dad, let's see, like my mom said, he loved to tell stories over and over again. And there was one, for some reason, I'm not sure, during the time, like at the story, it wasn't a very great story, but he loves this story and tells it all the time. So I was trying out for the Topeka Roadrunners up in Somerset, Wisconsin. And my dad loves Wisconsin, loves the Midwest, and so he was all excited to go back out there and see the countryside again. And so I had a great tryout. Got moved on to main camp. There's like a pre-tryout, which was this. And so I made it through to the All-Star game and made it to main camp, and they were sending me to main camp for free. And he was so pumped because that I finally was able to play 4 games in a row consistently and not have one bad game. But so we were at the bar. Well, I was 17. we were at this restaurant, and it was me and this kid I played with, Jackson Barley, on, and we were sitting at just getting dinner, and these 2 waitresses come up, and they're like, all right, mine and Jackson's age, and Jackson starts talking to him. Me and Jackson start talking to him, and my dad gets the hint, and he stands up, and he goes and walks and goes to the bar. And so me and Jackson were talking to these girls, and sorry Jordan, getting their numbers and everything, and and we were getting their numbers, saying after the tournament, come to our hotel, we'll hang out, yada yada yada. And my dad was at the bar meeting people he never met in his life, and they were all of a sudden his best friends. And I don't know about if you've ever seen that before or how you met him, but he could literally walk up to a bar to people he did not know and just be best friends with them and get to know them and somehow relate to them no matter how different they were or anything. So pretty incredible. So after all this is said and done, we had a day left before we left out to come home, and he was so happy. He was so pumped about the weekend. And then what do? Is I lock the keys in the goddamn rental car. So I call my mom terrified. I'm like, Mom, he's happy. He's too happy. I can't tell him. Can you call AAA for me, please? Please do it. Just, we need to get these keys out of the car. And she goes, nope, you got to go up there and tell him. And I told him, and he wasn't too mad just because he didn't want to, sacrifice the weekend on me being an idiot and locking the keys in the car. And and so he goes, all right, that's fine. Just make sure to be in the lobby waiting for the AAA guy. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And I felt terrible, whatever. And that night, those girls came over to go to the hot tub in the hotel. And and I told the lady at the front lobby, I go, hey, when the AAA guy gets here, can you come get me out of the hot tub? and I don't know if you can guess what happened from here. The lady in the lobby never got me. And so, I don't know if you've ever, this is my dad's signature, get your attention, you go, hey! And I heard that from across the pool, and I was like, oh no. This is not going to be good. And so I go outside, and he's ripped me a new one, all that good stuff. And we got the keys out of the car, and we got home, and about a week later, we're sitting in our living room and right at the house up here, and he just starts telling the story again. He goes, I can't believe you did that, because I locked the keys in the car like a couple years before in Spokane. He goes, I can't believe you did that again. But that was hilarious. What a great weekend, And that's just the type of person he was. He didn't hold a lot of anger in or he didn't keep things with him for that type. So he wasn't mad at me for a really long time. Thank God. So my next story is he's an old school guy, and when I was a kid, I always wanted to have my hair long, and I was never allowed to have my hair long, and. One day, me and my buddy Nash Wharton, who's over here, we were trying out for the Utah Grizzlies. We were like 10 years old, I think, and we just had this long hair. Nash had a big, before Bieber hair, and just out to here, and he was so proud of his hair too. And we were all just disgusting. We were so gross after this tryout, just smelly, And my dad we get in the car, and my dad's like, "Hey, you want to go get some ice cream?" Me and Nash are like, "Oh yeah, let's go get some ice cream." Nash and I, sorry, Mom. And he's like, you want to go get some ice cream? Oh yeah, let's go get some ice cream. Next thing I know, I'm strapped in a Supercuts chair with Nash, getting our heads shaved. And Nash the whole time was like, you can't do this to me. You can't do that. My parents are going to be so mad. You can't do that. And Darren and Jennifer, they thought it was hilarious. And and Darren's here too. I don't know where he's at, but my dad right now, oh, I see him, yeah. My dad right now would be like, hey, Darren, looks like we got to go get some ice cream. So my dad, he was I think I could say he was a second father to a lot of my friends here in Yakima, and going with that, he was also the hardest working person that you've ever met in your life. And he would get uncomfortable if he was sitting down in his chair for more than 10 minutes after working a 60-hour week or something like that. He would hate it. So he'd always be on his feet. And one morning, me and my friends were out late doing something in high school, and it was a packed house. And so I think it was, hey, watch that over there. And it was a packed house. I think two of my friends were in the guest room. I was in my room. I think one guy was on the floor. Someone was in Joe's room. And all of a sudden, going off the driveway story, there's a whole paving crew in our driveway, which is right out front of our guest room where two of my best friends were sleeping, and he started at 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday. And my friends, and I heard it too, but I was farther away, and they came into my room at like 7, just madder than hell. And they're like, what is your dad doing? Are you kidding me? All this machinery, blah, blah, blah. And he had a full-on paving crew in our driveway. He had a loader, he was backing up trucks, dumping them into the coal cow, paving, had a whole crew on a Saturday. Took him all day long, and my friends were so mad. And he knew that he couldn't just come and wake us up. Well, he's done that multiple times, but he knew that he couldn't do it. He had to find a different way to do it this day, and he sure found that way. So, so there's two sayings that he would always say that really kind of stick with you. And I only found one saying out like right the day he passed. I figured out, and it was, "A woman's work is never done." And some people, they don't really understand what that means, but this is what it means. It means taking care of the one you love, my beautiful mother over there. The work is never done to keep her happy and make sure she never has, she's a princess always. So. And the next one, he always says to me, he goes, "Willie, I love you like a rock." And I don't, no idea what that means. But I think I'm gonna leave that mystery and keep that mystery to him, because, Pops, I love you like a rock. Rest easy, man.
I think he would be proud of both of his boys. Obviously, thrilled about Donna's comments as well. So, what we'd want to do now is, on behalf of you, ever talk to Pete a little bit. Family is very important to Pete, and how he grew up, and we're honored today to have all of his sisters here. And so, on behalf of the sisters, I think Kathy was going to come up and make or say a couple words.
Hi, everybody. Ooh, really travels. Well, I wanted to thank you for this opportunity to share a story or two. But first of all, I have to tell you, I am the family sap. Okay. So if this gets a little teary, a friend of mine gave me a bunch of Kleenex. So this story is from graduation day from the University of Illinois. Right, guys? Okay. Well, Pete was graduating from the University of Illinois, which was my father's alma mater, and he was so proud of him. He was so proud of him that he was just about ready to burst. And so I drove over to Champaign. Amy came down. Mom was there. Dad and Dad's girlfriend, Marilyn, were there. So Mom was doing everything she could do to avoid Marilyn, which that makes a lot of sense. And Amy was acting as a liaison, trying to keep everybody happy. And I stayed way out of the way of that, and I was in the kitchen frying bacon. And then Pete came in, he said, "Hey, Kath, I have to go check on my grade." What? "Yeah, I have to go over to this lecture hall because the grades are posted, and I just need to make sure that I passed the final with enough points to, pass the class." And this never happened to his children, but in my generation I understood that. So, off he went. He was off in an instant. And while he was gone, I figured out what he was saying to me. And so I grew a little worried. And then he came back, and he had this really relieved look on his face, and I figured, oh, he must have passed. And then my next question to him was, "So what were you going to do if you didn't pass? How were you going to tell Dad?" He's like, "That's what you and Amy were for." So I appreciate Amy being there, but that's kind of a thing in our family, is we always had each other's back. So time advanced, so now I have another story. And we received a call that our dad had been killed in an automobile accident. And that was really hard on all of us, particularly Pete. So we had to go ahead and bring my dad's house up to saleable condition. You guys always, perhaps all of you have seen one of those home improvement shows on TV. So Pete lived in, he worked out of the Reno office, and he lived in Verdi. Right. So he would fly in on Friday evening, and I would pick him up at O'Hare. Now, I lived 5 hours away, so I would ditch work early myself, go ahead and pick him up at O'Hare, and he usually had everything planned out, what we were going to do, and the supplies that we needed, and it was my job to get the stain the right way from Sherman-Williams, and, you know, all these other things. And one thing was true is I've never seen a deck that's ever been too large, I'm sorry. They're usually too small. So I only saw one that was big enough. So Pete decided what we should do, Kathy, is we are going to go ahead and make the deck bigger. So we're going to extend that deck. So Dad died in November on Thanksgiving, so now this is fast forward in Illinois in winter, and it is now December 22nd. And I have to tell you, it was colder than a mother-in-law's kiss out there. It was so chilly. I hear over here. Yeah, that's right, boys. So I have to tell you, this was the record cold day for the 22nd, 1989. It was 21 degrees below zero, so nobody was sweating. So Pete had organized a work crew, and Amy and Jim and her boys, Billy, Jimmy, and Kurt, they had helped different weekends. I was there, Elizabeth, my daughter, was there, Rob was there, his dad, and all kinds of other people were there. And with all that cold weather, the deck still got done. Nobody developed a sweat, like I said earlier, but that was the kind of guy Pete was. People would follow him as he led because he was a leader. Oh, one would grumble about the work at hand, or he could cuss better than anybody I've ever heard, but the mission was accomplished. So I want to let you know that we loved him, and he was a great leader, and I believe he led bunches of other folks too, probably from Granite. So I love you guys all, and thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Amy, obviously one of the deck workers. I just wanted to share a couple of words with you. Unfortunately, we're all here for a sad reason. However, it's a tribute. And I wanted to let you know something about young Pete. In 1961, when I was 7 years old, I overheard our expectant mother, who had 3 daughters, remark to someone, "If this 4th baby isn't a boy, I'm going to jump off a cliff." Luckily for all of us, Pete was a boy, and our mother lived to the ripe old age of 90. Pete didn't start to talk at the appropriate age, and why would he? He would just point at what he wanted and grunt. And we would do whatever he wanted. Later, when he did speak, our little prince would sit in his wagon in his lederhosen, command his older sisters to go faster. And given our age differences, he was the only childhood sibling to our sister Beth. We were all older. Over the years, he earned many names, which Donna touched on all of them very eloquently. He was a friend to all. He was our anchor. We mourn for ourselves as we realize that our lives will never be the same. At the same time, we celebrate a life well lived, an example to all. Thanks.
Okay, so obviously a wonderful perspective from Pete's family that loved him dearly, and really some touching stories and accomplishing the goal of getting some laughs. So that's a terrific thing. Next we have someone from Granite Construction, the CEO of Granite Construction, Jim Roberts, wanted to say a couple words as well. So here he is here.
Well, I can tell where Pete got a few of his actions at Granite from. Point and grunt. He did that a lot. I think a lot of people here today would know that as he worked his way through the company. I think the one thing I hope that I get across today is that, and as I was talking to his sisters, how unassuming Pete was. And I hope that those of you that did not know how important Pete was in the business world, after I tell you a little bit about what he did at Granite, you walk away going, wow, I had no idea that Pete had accomplished that much and had been that important to a company and to the Granite family. And we always refer to ourselves as the Granite family. We know we're not the Matheson family, but at that point in time, he had another family. And we lived that way. And he was one of the leaders of our family. So Pete was started in the construction industry in 1983. And this is interesting. He started working for a company out of Chicago called Kenny Construction. And he was a carpenter foreman and a superintendent for him. And he traveled through several states and did work for them up until 1989. And the most interesting part about that was that he had heard about Granite because we had been joint venturing work in Chicago with the Kenny Construction Company. And here, fast forward to 2013, we literally acquired the Kenny Construction Company, and they are now part of the Granite family as well. So Pete knew what was going on long before we did. And he knew that we were going to come back and start making a presence in Chicago, and he helped us get there. So we hired Pete in 1989, and I remember when he came to us, and Bill Dory was my boss at the time, and he sent him up to Reno. And Pete had a little different background than most of the people that we hire out of college. Pete was an expert in the field already. He was a carpenter foreman. He had the work savvy, he had the work ethic, and it took me about 5 minutes to say, wow, Pete, we'd love to have you. So, happenstance, Loma Prieta earthquake happens that year, shortly after he got hired, 1989, and we sent him, or I think he actually asked Donna, to go down to the Bay Area and help rebuild the Santa Cruz area. Little did I know that Donna was down in the Bay Area, and there was an alternative motive to going down, and he told me how he would be demoing buildings and cleaning up Santa Cruz and cleaning up down there, but he did not tell me that Donna was down there until later. But I did find out later, and I also didn't know in 1989 that he went back to Illinois and rebuilt the family house, so I just assumed he was in Santa Cruz the entire time. So it didn't take long. Pete came back up several months later and started working his way through the Granite organization. And his work ethic was absolutely what the boys said. It was amazing. And he started off as an estimator, project engineer, project manager, became our construction manager from 1989 through 1997. And he knew what he was doing. He was out in the field, knew how to move dirt, knew how to pave, knew how to place concrete. He knew every single part of the business. He'd work out in the field during the day, and he'd come in and help us at night. I remember one morning, we used to have 5:30 a.m. staff meetings, and Pete came in from the night before. We had bought a bunch of grinders, a bunch of cold milling machines, and we thought it was really cool. Nobody knew how to run them, so Pete went out and figured out how to run them, and these were big, big toys. And he came in at 5:30 in the morning to join us at this meeting, and he took his glasses off, and he had big white circles around his eyes, covered in black asphalt all over. And he was laughing. He was smiling. And the point was, he says, who's going out tomorrow night with me? Who wants to learn how to run a grinder? Nobody volunteered. In 1997, Pete came to us and said, I've had an offer to go work for another company and become part owner and general manager of a company called Peavine Construction. Peavine was a much smaller company than we were. They built subdivisions in the Reno area, and they were an excellent contractor. So Pete took a 2-year stint and went over to them, but they did not do asphalt paving. So every time they would build a subdivision, he'd call us up, and Granite would do the asphalt paving for him, and he kept close to all of us all the time, very close to everybody in Granite. In 1999, he called us back and said, you know, I want to do more. I want to do more than just build subdivisions, although I really enjoy these guys. It's a great company. I want to go out and see the world. I want to do bigger things. So we hired him back in 1999 in a heartbeat, and said, Pete, we need your help in Ogden, Utah. A lot of the Utah people are here today. We sent him up to Ogden, to be our area manager up there. And I remember this vividly, this story. So he was up there working for Bruce McGowan back then. We had a big team of Granite people that we were trying to get. Gibbons and Reed was the name of the company, trying to get them into the Granite family. And he was going to move the facility from the old Webb facility over to the west side of Ogden, called West Haven. So we had the permission. We bought an old used hot plant. We moved it over to the west side of town. He built a new office complex, and he invited me up there one day to visit it. And the office was on the road, and the asphalt plant was in the back. So I drove in the front, came to the office. It was a beautiful looking office, very small, done very nicely. Had a nice lawn. And by the way, if you worked for Granite, boys, you had to cut the lawn. So I come to the office, and he's telling me, I'm looking at it, and he says, "Oh, look at the plant, Jim." He says, "Look at how nice that plant looks." And he did look really nice. It was a used plant. Looking at it from the road, it looked brand new. He had painted it. And I was ecstatic because he knew that I loved our asphalt plants, always clean and painted. So we're ready to leave, and I said, "Hey, Pete, I'd really like to go back and look at the asphalt plant, and walk around, go meet the operator up in the control house, and kind of see everything." And he goes, "No, Jim, you really don't need to go do that." I said, "Pete, I'd really like to do that. Why can't I go do that?" "Well, we need to go. We need to go out and look at some jobs." "No, Pete, let's go look at the asphalt plant." "Okay." So he takes me to the backyard. I go to the back side of the asphalt plant, and it wasn't painted. I said, "Pete, how do you get an asphalt plant and just paint the front half of it? This is a big, big machine sitting here." And he goes, "Jim, it wasn't in the budget." He goes, "But I promise you, we'll make enough money so that we can paint the back half of it next year. I promise you." Perfect Pete story, right? If it wasn't in the budget, you weren't going to do it, period. So in 2002, we moved Pete down to Salt Lake City to be our operations manager, construction manager. And one of the things, and it was interesting, I was in Utah not too long ago, and one of the things I learned from that team, and they were talking to me because this was right after Pete had passed, was what did they learn from Pete? They learned to get back to the basics. They learned the core part of the business. They knew their costs. Always know your cost. If you're going to run a business, I don't care if it's a construction company or anything else, know your costs. He helped build that business in Utah to the #1 business in Granite. A big company, and he helped build that business to the top business in the entire company. 2006, we asked him to actually come down and work with John and others of us running the regional part of the business, the branch part of the business, to be our construction expert. And he would go around all the Granite businesses in the western U.S. and fix things for us. We had a lot of issues, as any company does, and Pete was our fix-it guy. So in 2006, he would run around the entire western United States. If we had a problem, Pete would go fix it for us. And his job was to get out there and make all of us look good, and he did an amazing job. 2007, those of you here will remember, in April of 2007 is when Granite bought Superior Group, right here in Yakima. We asked Pete to come up and be our manager up here, and this was a new environment for us. And he came up here, and we called this the Columbia River Branch at that time, if you remember the name. And I remember Al Diatley and the entire team. It was a great acquisition. It was enjoyable. It was friendly, and we had a new manager in Yakima, and Pete was our guy. So his job was to help the Superior team become part of the Granite family. Now that in itself is always a difficult task, but at the same time, in January of the following year, in 2008, we acquired the remaining shares of another company over on the west side, over out of the Puget Sound area in Seattle, named Wilder. And now we asked Pete to run them both and to make them into Granite. And now Granite would be, at that point in time, one of the largest contractors in the state, maybe the largest. So now Pete had the unruly job of granitizing an entire state with two separate cultures and bringing a new name in, Granite in, and Pete did it. Who else could do a better job than Pete than to say, we're all going to be part of the Granite family. We're all going to do things the way we do them. And if we do it that way, we're going to all have fun, we're going to enjoy each other, and it is going to be one big family. That is exactly what he did. He did that for 5 years. Now, those of you in the state of Washington will remember that Pete would hop in his pickup and he would go for a visit or go for a drive. When Pete went for a drive, it wasn't to the grocery store and back. Pete would go for a drive and he'd head over to Ellensburg, Wenatchee, he'd go down to Dallasport, he'd go over to Vancouver, he'd go all the way up to Bellingham, he'd go throughout the entire state, he'd go for a drive. And if you spent any time with him, it would be days in the truck with him. Sometimes it was scary driving too, just as a note. Most of the time it was scary driving. Boys know for sure, right? So he did an amazing job, and we asked him in 2013, after 5 years of organizing this business up here, if he would come down and help us reorganize and help us rebuild our business in California. We had been going through a tremendous recession. California was heavily hit, and I asked him to come down and help oversee that business. He did that, and he did it in a fashion that was so unique. Pete asked if the family could still live in Yakima, and if he could go down and fly down on Mondays and work and then come back on Thursday or Friday, whatever day it was. And of course he could. Pete, you go do whatever you need to go do. Help us out. We've been through some difficult times in California. The recession hit California very heavily. I want you to get that business back to the basics. He'd fly down on Monday morning. He'd drive from job to job, from plant to plant, from business to business all week long. He didn't have a home in California. His home was Granite. That was it. He'd stay in a hotel every night. And for those of you that do know Pete really well, he was not a corporate guy. So he didn't spend a lot of time in the corporate office or across the street where his office was, because it was across the street from the corporate office. A little too close. But he rebuilt that business. And he spent the time and effort. A lot of the California folks are here today. So I thought about this as I was thinking about why was Pete so successful in everything he did? He started off in Granite in Reno, successful. He helped his own business in Reno, successful. Moved to Utah, helped everybody, successful. Moved to the state of Washington, helped rebuild build an entire business here, successful. Came back to California and was running $1 billion business in the state of California. And I think people don't realize how big of a job Pete Matheson had. He was one of the senior people in our company and had one of the hardest jobs, if not the hardest job, in this entire company. So what made Pete so successful? He loved what he did. It wasn't work for Pete. He went to work every day to have fun. And I used to always think about Pete when he was working, how come that guy never gets tired? Because he's having fun. When you're out having fun, you're not going to get tired. You're going to want to do more and more of it. It was the way he worked. It wasn't work to him. He had a passion for what he did. He went to work every day with a passion. Again, he loved it. It wasn't a hardship. The long hours were tough. The long hours gave him energy. Most of all, he loved the people. He loved the people he worked with. It was his family. It was his other family. It was the Granite family. He'd work hard during the week. He'd come home on Thursday night. Then he'd hang out with the crowd. And he would go barbecue at work. And he would work just as hard. But it was the other part of his passion. Family came first. There was no doubt about it. We knew where he was on Thursday night. And I could have cared less if he was working on Friday. He deserved the time to be with his family. So I also wrote a couple things down as to what really made him so good at what he did. And what it was that he was a technician. He knew every single part of the business. He knew how to estimate. He knew how to run our plants. He knew how to physically do the work in the field. And when somebody challenged him, he could provide a response that was authentic, and he had the answers. He didn't need to go ask somebody else what was was going to happen because he had already done it and he knew how to do it right. So I also wrote a couple comments down as why did I love to work with Pete? I worked with Pete for 28 years. Why did I love to work with him? Well, first of all, because he had a passion for everything he did. And it wasn't a hardship for Pete, it was a passion. Of course, he bailed me out a lot, covered my back a lot, took the hardest assignments and accomplished them and was successful. He loved a challenge. And what happens is that when people love a challenge, who do we give our toughest jobs to? The people that you trust. And he loved taking on a challenge. Whether it was an acquisition, whether it was getting our plants fixed, whether it was taking care of people. He was a fix-it guy. He loved to fix things. He ran towards problems. He was short and to the point. How many people would send Pete a text message and he'd respond back, yep. Or you send him an email, a one-pager, 3 or 4 paragraphs. Response back, nope. Or the other one was, sure. You know, here you are going through top to bottom and all of a sudden you get a one-liner back. He was a man of few words, and he didn't need to because he was pointing and running. He also liked to play games on people. When he liked you, he'd play games with you. Every once in a while he'd call me and say, hey Jim, you want to get in on this game? I want to take care of, I want to pick on Radich today, or I want to pick on Tedesco today. Or here, will you send them an email? And I really want to see what their response is. Believe me guys, those weren't mine, those came from Pete. He always wanted to know where he stood. He was a man who knew where he wanted to be, and he wanted to make sure that he was where he thought he was. He was not a man that left things up to questions. He'd call me every once in a while, and he'd say, we okay? Yeah, I think so, Pete. Are we okay? And he goes, yeah, I thought so, but I just wanted to make sure we're okay. Just this last week, the week before he passed, I was up with Mike's business up in Sacramento with Pete. We were looking at some reserves, and we had a long, hard, drawn-out meeting for an afternoon on our plants business. And Pete called me the next morning, and he said, "Hey, we okay?" "Yeah, we're okay, Pete." And he goes, "That was really fun yesterday, wasn't it?" And I said, "That was. It was 4 hours of jawing with Pete across the table, you know, making sure that we were going to do what's right for Granite." And he loved that. He just wanted to call the next morning to make sure that I came out of that meeting thinking like he did. So, Donna, Joe, Will, I hope you know what a difference your father and your husband made to this company. And I would say far more than the Granite family, I would say to the industry. He was a leader, not just in our company, he was a leader in this industry. He's made a significant, huge difference to our lives, the Granite lives, the Granite family. I want to thank you for sharing Pete with us for the last 28 years. And you did more than share, because I know that we took way too much of his time away from you. It has been not just a privilege to work alongside your husband, it has been an unbelievable pleasure. And I want to let you know for sure that he will not always be just in our minds and in our hearts, but he will be a part of Granite forever. And I want to thank all three of you for sharing this.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jim. So everybody's come a long way, and seen perspective from a few different areas, and obviously Donna's perspective of Pete. We've seen Will and Joe give their overview and their memories of their dad. Obviously, Jim coming up, and from a professional standpoint, probably one of the most humble guys I know, and I know from a lot of you, even on our hike this morning, we took a little bit of a hike, and a couple of people made the comment, you know, I didn't realize how big a deal Pete was, and that's kind of the guy that he was. So thanks, Jim, for those comments and kind of really encapsulating everything. And you know, what I'd like to do is tell you from a friend's perspective. And my name's Dan Wanker. I never introduced myself, but honored to call Pete my friend. And what I'd like to go through is a little bit, and I heard a saying from somebody, or somebody mentioned to me the other day that when somebody passes away, the best thing you can do is tell stories about their life. And that's kind of what we're doing today. And that's what I wanted to share with you today, and then we'll have some comments from some people. But the one thing that I did want to say, and you heard it a few times here, and if there's anybody crying right now, you can hear Pete in the back of your mind saying, "Hey, what's all the boo-hooing about?" So I'd like to kind of share a couple of comments and a couple of things as far as my experiences with Pete as a friend here in Yakima. And fortunately, if you've ever talked to Pete, Pete was never really technically in sales, but being a salesperson my entire career, had always respected Pete for his salesmanship. The one thing that stands out in my mind is there was a time a few years ago where there was a huge fire on Calwichie Nursery, and the fire was raging, and to the point where in the back of our house, the entire hillside was on fire. We had a fire truck in our driveway the entire day. Things were just raging, and as a result of the fire, the sheriff's department set up roadblocks coming out to our house. So next thing I know, I get a call from Pete. Pete says, we need to get some stuff out of there. I need to help you evacuate. I said, okay, that's fine. So after hearing about the sheriff and all, Pete says he's coming, so I figured Pete's not going to show up. Next thing you know, here comes Pete. And he's driving up the road, comes into the driveway, and there he is in his truck. And I said, Pete, how did you get through the sheriffs? Or the way that they were protecting everything. He said, well, he said, I figured that they were going to give me a hard time. He said, so as soon as I saw him, the first thing I did was get out of the truck. And I was talking to the sheriff, and we're talking back and forth, and Willie kind of touched on it a little bit. Next thing I know, I'm laughing with the guy, and he lets me through. I said, well, that's great, Pete. I said, that's terrific that he let you through to this big fire and to help us out. And he explained to the sheriff that he had to get through to his friends. His friend lived down the street, he needed to get him out. I said, that's great, Pete. I said, that's really a wonderful thing that you got through, but help me out here, Pete. You got through the roadblock, and you have a truckload of firewood in the back of your truck. The guy never saw it, it'd be okay, and I'd get through. So that was the salesmanship as far as Pete was concerned. The other thing that Pete was really, a lot of people don't realize, he was a master magician. And we had the opportunity of Donna and my wife Mary and Pete to spend some time at a couple of the establishments in downtown Yakima, making sure that we were spreading goodwill. And so we would go to the bar, and we'd be sitting there, and we'd be kind of talking and having a good time. And they always there's a couple of bars in town, and hopefully nobody owns one that's here, but they had all these little tiny glasses that they could give you a sampler of. And so Pete would go, can I have one of those little samplers? And so there'd be a couple of samplers sitting there, and the bartender would turn around and go back, and then we'd have our glass, we'd have a couple of drinks at the bar. And then you'd see this twinkle come in his eye. And next thing you knew, you turned around, all the glasses were gone. They were all gone. And you really didn't know where they were. And so then as we were leaving later on, I'm standing next to my wife Mary, and she has a rather big purse. And while we're walking out the door, you hear this little clink of glassware while we went through the back door. So one thing I would say is if you go to the Matheson house, they have genuine barware at their house. It's a whole rack full of the stuff. So he was a bit of a magician. The thing that everybody's touched on as well is how hardworking Pete was. And if you've been around Pete, and people have mentioned it, it goes without saying, probably the hardest working guy you've ever met in your life. Entertainment to Pete was working, and that's what he did for fun. It's a thing that I share with Pete, part of the reason why he's one of my best friends. He shared that with my dad. The best thing he could do in life, and my dad has, or we have similar stories that Joe and Will do as far as spending spring break doing work. So hard work was a big deal to Pete. The part that stands out is, Pete took up mountain climbing. I had moved to Yakima, a guy that grew up in Philadelphia, and started climbing mountains. And after I started doing it for a little while, you start to realize, this is a lot of work. And it takes a lot of training, takes a lot of hard work. And not only hard work while you're training, but also hard work while you're actually doing the activity. And so everybody knows how hard it is, and there's a couple of the climbing guys that are here today. But one thing Pete was able to do was he was able to take the hard-working attitude of climbing and make it more difficult. And by that, what he did is he took the advice of his son Joe. So here you are. You got to picture this, if you will. You know, you're climbing thousands of feet on these mountains. And some of the guys were out there climbing today. So you're climbing thousands of feet, very steep grade. And you're just kind of going along and you're saying, wow, you know, I want to get to the top. I want to get to the top. But I'm in a lot of pain right now. And all of a sudden, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, not the worst, but a bad thing that could happen to you is all of a sudden you get a cramp in your leg. So that's a bad thing. So you can't finish climbing if you have a cramp in your leg. So Pete had a remedy that his son Joe gave him. And Pete's remedy to that, while you're going through all this pain, was he would say, here, drink this pickle juice. It'll help your cramp. So if you've ever drank pickle juice before, it's the most bitter, most nasty thing you've ever had in your life. But what I'd say is that only Pete would be the one to find the remedy to all your pain and make it just slightly more painful in order to take care of everything. The other thing that we've talked about here is obviously Pete, the family man. Pete loved his family. You know, his family was first and foremost, no matter what he did. You know, we would take, you know, up in the hills behind over here in Yakima. Pete and I spent a lot of time up there. Probably spent more hours than we probably care to remember up on Mount Clemens, and taking those long hikes. And if you've ever been a hiker or a climber, you spend time and you're talking once in a while. Once you're, you know, in an area where you can kind of catch your breath and talk a little bit. We would share a lot of stuff, and I was able to, you know, I appreciate the people that he worked with, from the standpoint that Pete always had some great stories. And I always learned a ton about Pete's life experiences and the way that he had an outlook on life. But, you know, the one thing that we both shared and that we both agreed on, in addition to our family, is that we both married up. And I know all of you know that as far as Don is concerned. So. And it was always amazing to us that, you know, a couple of knuckleheads, you know, Pete was a farm boy from Illinois, you know, I'm a city guy from Philadelphia, that we managed to find these great women that took us in and actually, you know, we really think they like us a lot of times. And so that was the other thing as far as Pete the family man. The final thing I wanted to let you know is that a lot of you have a lot of stories, you know, as far as Pete is concerned, and you'll share them or we'll have some time for some comments. But I really have to say that I am honored to consider Pete Matheson my friend. And you know, there's a couple of things that everybody's talked about today, but really there's a hole in my heart that'll be there for a very long time. It'll be there forever. The thing that fills that heart, as all of you have seen, is Pete's smile. And whenever and I know everybody's experienced that, so whenever you feel sad, and whenever you miss Pete, I think what you ought to do is just put that smile in your head forever. The other thing that I draw on, and it's something that, and I'm not sure about the exact story, so I hope Will understands the way I repeat the story. But you know, when Willie went off, and you can tell the difference between Joe and Will. So obviously, when Will went off to college, you know, this was big celebration time for a lot of people. And so there's Will, and he's gone off to college. So here's Will, and Will enjoys life. And so he's gone off to college, and somebody mentioned to him and said, hey, Willie, you know, you're going off to college. You're going to finally be out from under your dad's wing. You know, you're able to do what you want. And he said, oh, no. He said, you know, I'm going off to college. He said, but that little voice of Pete's always going to be sitting right here, yakking in my ear. And so what I'd like to say as well is, in addition to Pete's smile, that little voice of his will always be with me. And always be sitting on my shoulder, kind of telling me and talking to me and giving me the advice that he always gave, and was able to share with me all these wonderful things. And so that's the part of Pete, and those are all the remembrances that I have as far as Pete Matheson is concerned. So thanks for letting me share part of his life. And then I wanted to really open it up. If there's some people that have some comments, I believe we have some time. Open it up now.
I'm Mike Farrell. I know Pete from his younger days at the U of I. There's a couple of my brothers here from U of I as well. I could tell you 1,000 really drunk college stories and Pete doing things that are wild, but I really, as a family man, I more focus on the things that he did for me as a family man. And a couple of things, Donna. My first two kids are born. he sends me those street signs that said Allison and Jack Way. I'll never forget that. And I get up early in the morning like many of the construction contractor people do, and Pete always called me. I mean, I'd be getting out of the shower and he's calling me because he's up at 5:30 in the morning. He was the best. You know, these guys could, if you guys want to find me later tonight, we can give you the dirt on what Pete did at U of I, because he was a farm guy, but he was, you know, at U of I, he was the only farm guy that we had. And whether it was cow tipping or, you know, cruising around the South Fields or whatever else, or you were talking about that grinder. My one story. So Pete, in front of Cam's, which is a big bar in Champaign, there's a backhoe, all right, and they're doing work on the street. And so Pete goes, let's see, what can we do with this, all right? And so he got up and he talked about getting something started. He was able to do that. Got it started, the cops came, and everything else, we all ran. But back to his construction things, he was good. And the other thing I'll say about Pete is that he was the only person I know that could talk about the difference between concrete and cement. Yes! So I came from Chicago today. I would not have missed this for the world, and Donna knows it took me a million hours to get here. What a turnout. I'm stunned. This is so cool. I miss Pete like crazy, but like we say, remember the man, remember the heart, remember the look, remember what a friend he was for us. Thank you for giving me a couple minutes to talk.
Hi folks, my name is Dan Gonzalez. This is Charlie Summers, and I think as fraternity brothers back in the old college days, you might expect a good old raunchy fraternity story, but the decorum here doesn't allow that, but I'm going to do it anyway. How about that? No, you know, I got a call. I was chapter president many years ago, and I got a call from a relative, and I can't tell who that is. Maybe that person's here today, but and said that Pete was looking for a fraternity, and I got the call, and I said, well, yeah, we'd like to talk to him. And I remember borrowing a car and driving over and picking him up, and we hit it off right away. We just connected, and I think that same connection happened when he came over for dinner, and just within a few weeks, he had pledged the house, and I could tell you a couple of really funny, raunchy stories here, and so I'll continue. But I remember the one Friday afternoon, we had a little party for Pete, being the new pledge, the new member of the house, and got to the big bar on campus, and it was in the mid to late afternoon, and I got there, and Pete came running up to me all excited as we were and said, Gonzo, I blew off all my afternoon classes to be here. And I said, well, Pete, perhaps that's not really the best way to start, but gosh, we're really glad to have you. And it gets better. And so later in the evening, of course, as the night goes on, and the beer goes down and the beer goes down, and I think we're all familiar with the buildup of carbonation, if you will, from drinking a lot of beer. And if you all recall the song Shout, I don't know if the young people here don't, but there was on the dance floor, all the folks would be up in the bar and on the dance floor and jump up and yell the word shout in a big frenzy, and it was a fun thing. And what a great opportunity to eliminate some of that carbonation buildup, if you know what I say. And but unfortunately, it didn't work out for Pete so well, because he came to me right after that happened. He came up to me and said, Gonzo, I got to go home. And I said, well, you got to get some rest, you got to go to sleep. He goes, no, I got to change my pants. Pete, I think on behalf of all the fraternity members, I think we love you, and Pete will remember you always. And we, as Mike said, we wouldn't miss this for the world. We love you, Pete.
So, in my professional life, I've done a lot of these, and you never like to do them, but you kind of get in the mode and get your mind steeled a little bit, and you go through it. And it seems as though I'm not able to do that tonight. Pete was a friend, and he was a friend to all of you. He was a friend to us, and probably a better friend to us than we were to him. But when I think of Pete, it always makes my heart happy. And that's certainly the way I want to always remember him. and remember Donna. You know, it was 27 years ago next month that I got on a flight when I was running for office and got out here, and you guys were married, and I was back in like 23 hours. It's awful that it's almost like that again right now. But I will say this. When you talk about Pete barbecuing, you know, when we were in college, he did love to barbecue. And he always liked the best things in life when he barbecued. So he worked on the kill floor at the University of Illinois. And there was always a couple of times a year when Illinois would raise money, and they would have their prize cattle. And they would raise hundreds of thousands of dollars selling these sides of beef, different cuts of beef. And Pete was always good about making sure that we were well fed. So Pete would go in the locker and exchange the not so good cuts of beef with the cuts of beef that these guys in Chicago had paid all this money for. But we did appreciate that the alumni were taking care of us the way they were. We appreciated that Pete was too. And we could
stand up here and tell you stories for a very long time, but I've always learned that, you know, it's better to be sincere, be brief, and be seated. So I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the situation, but I wanted to kind of summarize, and if you think about the people that spoke tonight, everything from the heart. The fact that this many people showed up from really across the country is really testimonial to Pete's life, and I think the thing that you take away from it, and I think I speak on behalf of Donna, is that the thing you take away from it is that live your life every day. Live your life, share what you have, make people's lives better, and tell them that you love them. And so I think that all those things come into play. On behalf of Donna, Will, as well as Joe, thank you everybody for coming. We're going to move inside a little bit. There's some, in Pete's tradition, there's a little bit of leftover food in there, so there's some food for everybody to take away. And then also, if you've never had Pete's Spice, you need to take a little container of that as well. So there's some of that inside as well. But again, thank you for coming here today. Into Yakima, Washington, it is a destination spot, and just pleased and thrilled. But live your life every day, and on a day that could be very sad, I think that what you ought to do is enjoy it, smile, come inside and tell some more stories, and let's finish up laughing so hard our sides hurt. Thanks a lot.